I can hear it.
Good morning and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. One of our favorite guests in the whole city and public leaders in New Haven is with us this morning. And sometimes she's behind the headlines you don't see, because you don't always see headlines about young people who do great in New Haven, become successful, build wonderful lives and families here back in the city where they grew up. And that happens a lot, and they don't become headlines, although sometimes they do for good accomplishments, because of Patricia Melton. Patricia Melton is the CEO of New Haven Promise, what began as a wonderful universal scholarship program for public school students to go into college, and has evolved into so much more in terms of helping build a successful community in New Haven. And Patricia, thank you for coming in to Dateline New Haven. We love when you visit to tell us what's new with New Haven Promise.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here.
So that is the question. What's new with New Haven Promise?
Oh, my goodness. There is so much that's new. I mean, obviously, you probably heard about that we will have an out-of-state component now for historical Black colleges and universities.
Well, tell us a little more about this, just so people know. If you keep a B, is it B average or C?
B average.
You keep a B average. You go to New Haven Public Schools. You keep a B average.
B average.
You do some community service. You're going to get at least some, if not all, of your tuition paid in college if you go through New Haven Promises.
Right. You get a tuition benefit.
To in-state, like
in-state,
like
yes.
UConn, Southern,
Yale, University of New Haven, Quinnipiac.
And so that's how we've always
Memphis.
known this. We've known this now for about 15 years. Is the
12.
Program? 12 years of program. Feels longer. 12 years the program. It's such a part in New Haven. And and so the until today, whenever we talked about those in-state colleges, and that's a big focus of it, right?
Yes.
But what you're talking about now is the way it's expanded in a really important way, which is historically Black colleges and universities outside of Connecticut. Tell us about that.
Yes. I mean, I do want to distinguish that is an additional option that is not just focused on New Haven Promise. Actually, we were approached by Yale to assist in providing information and data, because we do track students. And we saw that, a good number of students were interested in historical Black colleges, but many do not attend because of the expense. And so, Yale, in its research around its role historically and in terms of proceeds from slavery that the university may have benefited from. There was that, the slavery working group. But also what came to light is that New Haven had the opportunity to, in fact, have the first historical Black college and university in the country. And it was not taken up by the city. There were, in fact, many who were against it at the time.
I thought.
I don't know if there were violent protests, but
and wasn't Yale involved in the opposition?
Well, I think Yale was involved in the opposition, and so Yale approached us, and obviously we have a lot of data about college attendance trends and whatnot, and so we were able to assist. So it's a competitive scholarship that's really separate from Promise, but one of the requirements is that you have to be a Promise scholar.
So in other words, a scholar meaning someone who's gone to New Haven Public School.
Yes.
And gotten that B average. Community
yes.
service project.
And 40 hours of community service.
So
That's
now
exactly
I'm
right.
a little confused about the Yale thing. I saw this. They're giving people scholarship money not to go to Yale, but to go to an HBCU.
Well, it's for New Haven public school students, right? And it's their way of reckoning with their past, I guess. I did not
It's so
sit on
interesting
that. But
'cause-
there's a lot online that you can read about it.
Right. So those students, wouldn't Yale want the really good students? Or I guess they're saying students might prefer to go to HBCUs.
Well, there are, each year we fund about 750, it's dropped a little since COVID, students from New Haven Public Schools to go to like 18 or 19 colleges and universities, all in state. So this will just,
Okay.
add roughly 10 to 12 students a year
Oh,
who
okay.
would be going to historical black colleges at
I've
this
loved
point.
the debate over not debate actually, because not really a debate. I've loved the discussion about HBCUs.
Mm-hmm.
And being white, it's not my discussion, right? I'm always so interested in it about how for some students, cause, and obviously the answer is important is that everybody has all the choices so they can know what's best for them. That for some students it's so important or very promises to be able to go to an HBCU, an environment that's supportive and culturally comfortable so they can do their best. And for other students, it was so important in the 50s and 60s and 70s that we began knocking down the barriers that still need to be knocked down. And now there's some new effort that's needed so that people have the choice. So that if you're a person of color and you're exceptional, you can go to an exceptional college. And if you're just really smart, you get the same opportunity somebody else does, and that we integrate. And then other people have argued that HBCU suffered from integration because of some of their best students no longer went to HBCUs, but went to Yale, right? So like,
Yes.
and if you were born a generation earlier, you might not have gone to Yale. They might not have let you come, correct?
Right. I mean, there was one point where women could not go to
That's
Yale.
right. I forgot women
right?
too. Yeah.
I believe.
And it's the same issue, women's colleges, right? Yeah.
Right. I mean, Yale, you have to look back and say, what was Yale's history? And it was for a certain class, gender, maybe religious. There were a lot of people who could
They had
not
a
go
quote
to
on
Yale.
Jews. They had all stuff written
Right,
about how we
right.
weren't good
So-
for the student body.
I look at that and I say, so that was historical Yale. Now you have contemporary Yale. And I think as folks look in this country and see there are still educational gaps for opportunity, you cannot deny the value that historical black colleges and universities bring. And there are Hispanic serving colleges, tribal colleges, and those histories are pretty complex. But certainly historical black colleges were there when, in fact, black students were not allowed to go to just about any other institution. In fact, at one point, it was illegal to even educate a black person.
And it's just so interesting
yeah.
about how, to me, it was sort of like when we make progress, you have a new set of challenges. So how do we keep those HBCUs strong so that they can still play what's still such an important role when we also have to be sure to knock down the barriers that prevent equal access to other institutions, integrated institutions?
Absolutely. And so what I say is that I did not attend a historical black college or university, but what's really interesting is the president of Morehouse, who is Dr. David Thomas. He was my freshman counselor. He went to Yale because his family, the cost of attending Morehouse, which was his number one choice, was exorbitant. And so
Yale was cheaper?
And Yale gave him financial aid, more financial
Nice
aid.
thing.
Obviously they have more financial aid. And that's probably still the case. I mean, we know it's just not historical black colleges, it's just the cost of college, regardless of institution, for just about every family is a challenge.
And I'm also thinking about how every student is different. You deal with this more than any individual in New Haven. You face to face, tough conversations kids are having about their futures. You are with, hundreds, 750 kids a year. They're not kids anymore by the time they leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are deciding where to go to college. And that's a really important choice. And I guess I'm interested in what you have to think about the nuances of what ends up being best. So for your freshman counselor, it was really a financial decision. Yale was paying the freight instead of Morehouse.
Yes.
Are there other students you deal with, especially now you can have this opportunity where you think, given your experience dealing with so many students, living it yourself, how to make that tough choice about, is it best to go to HBCU? Is it better to go to an Ivy League college?
Well,
Truth is fine. You're going to be fine either way, right? But
Well, you may or you may not,
Right.
because as we know, the nature of accumulating college debt has changed. And I don't know if you knew this, but college loan debt cannot be discharged in bankruptcy court.
Wow, I didn't
In
know
other
that.
words, that's
Yeah.
a debt that you're going to carry to your grave.
Oh my goodness.
And, when you look at the disparities in income and wealth, it's a really important decision to make. I think what the Pennington Fellowship does is it really brings this choice at least back on the table as a choice
Yeah.
that is viable without, mortgaging your
Yeah.
future earning power.
But you've told me something I hadn't even thought about, which is that what we think is the obvious way is it's going to cost you more to go to a Yale. In fact, it's the opposite sometimes. I mean, I haven't even thought about that part. Like if
Right.
you'd rather go to Morehouse, you'd rather go to Spelman, but Yale, you're going to be able to go for
You're going to
free.
get at
Yeah.
a historical, predominantly white institution that has endowment to subsidize that tuition. And
They do
there are
have that
many
endowment.
colleges. It's just not obviously historical black colleges. There are a lot of colleges out there that it's very difficult, which is why tuition is out of reach for so many.
Yeah. And we're talking to Patricia Melton, knows more about the subject than anyone in New Haven because she's the CEO of New Haven Promise, which sets 750 New Haveners of very varying different academic levels to college to have that chance at a better life, and then helps them not just go to college, but make it through. And then in so many cases, I think the number you had was 86% come back to New Haven and become viable members of our community, building families, getting jobs, building careers. Now, toward that end, you have an event coming up next week. So you're not just saying, so long, folks, have a good time at college. You're saying, come on back. We want to make sure you have a summer internship. And, that's
Right.
another thing that we learn that, when you're in college, those internships often are your foot in the door to a career.
It's how you build that first resume. And, that's sort of the hidden curriculum that's not so obvious. Many of our students are first generation of college. We're a wonderful city, welcoming, all types of folks here where they can build a life, including immigrants. We're a sanctuary city. And as you know, the Promise Scholarship is available to any resident, regardless of immigration status. And so, yes, New Haven is a wonderful place to raise a family, to afford college. And so because we do have a high percentage of first generation to college students, low income, about 75% of our students, between 70 and 75%, their family household income is under 60, and half of those are under $30,000 a year. But for many of them, they're not coming from white collar backgrounds, and they do believe, and not because they're unintelligent, because they don't know, that part of going to college is certainly the academic component, but also the soft skills, teamwork, learning technology, how to communicate, how to problem solve. And that's what all the sort of co-curriculars are about. Like, I would be interested in knowing, did you write on the school newspaper? Did you know that you wanted to be?
I know I wanted to be a reporter.
Okay, and
So at
did you
first
do
school
things
paper,
in college?
and then I went to register New Haven Advocate. Yeah,
That's
all the
right. And you
classes,
did things in college that made that transition into the workforce easy for you, or easier, or set you up to
Open
be.
the door.
It opened the door. Well, those variables have not changed. Without experience, without sort of building, having experience in a paid internship, it's very difficult for scholars to just make that transition. And it was a natural move for us in 2014 when we started interacting with our scholars, and we saw that they weren't getting internships, they weren't starting early
You
enough.
saw that.
Then
Yeah.
we said,
And the reason
this
you saw
is
that is
something.
you personally, something so impressed me about you, Patricia. You personally speak to, is this still true? So many of the students, when they're in college, they've been in Promise, you check in with them. And because you'd been in college yourself and you had to make a transition and deal with stuff that wasn't as easy, right? that you knew what they might be going through and what the help they might need to stay on track. Is that true?
Absolutely.
So what impressed me, it's been years since I've been to one of these. So next week on Wednesday at 2:00, you have one of these fairs for college students to talk to employers who are going to offer. And you get a lot of people there. Do you still? Like I went there years
Yes, well,
ago.
we've been virtual. Obviously, we did take a hit, but we still maintained. We just had fewer internships and some hybrid. But last summer, we weren't completely back to where we were pre-COVID, but we placed about 130 students in paid internships. We were on track to place about 200 in paid internships before COVID hit. So now this will be our first back face-to-face fair, which the last time we had a face-to-face fair was in 2020, January, because you remember COVID, where everything was shut down.
So
in
Wednesday,
March.
2:00, Commons in New Haven, which now is called
Schwartzman
Schwartzman.
Center.
Yeah. Okay, I'll leave that in the
It's now Commons at Schwartzman Center.
So we're going to we're no longer live in New Haven at Yale. We live in New Haven at Yale at Schwartzman. Right?
Yes.
So you get all the employees in the
Beautiful
room.
facility, by the way.
I was blown away when I went to your last one. It was the Yale Art guy because there were so many employees of different kind of places. There was Yale New Haven Hospital if you want to go into healthcare. There was Ronell Higgins pitching the Yale Police, as a career where they want college grads policing their community. You had tech companies, if I'm not mistaken, that were there as well. So what kind of, and this is another strength you bring to this job, is that you're all over town, you know people in the streets and suites, and you really get decision makers to commit to participating. What kind of people are you going to have at this?
Very similar. I mean, we have folks who show up. I mean, obviously Yale is the leader. They're the number one employer in the city, so we have all sorts of departments. We'll probably have about 30 different hiring managers from various Yale
departments. They are the biggest
departments.
employer in town. So
Yes, they really are. And they hire more of our students and have more internships than anyone else, just because of their sheer size. But we do have, others, Arts and Ideas, the city of New Haven Public Schools, which is in dire straits to attract, more students and more citizens into education. There are a number of different, organizations that will be there.
And what's interesting to me as well, some of this might be a little different from in the past, is there was always a need to find talented people to fill skilled jobs. Mm-hmm. Even when we didn't have the situation of now when there's a shortage, which is easing, for hire, people having a hard time finding people to work. But now I think it's much more pronounced, if I'm not mistaken, that employers are really looking for educated, skilled people to fill posts. They really need to invest extra effort in getting someone who's going to be a good medium to long-term employee, someone who has the tools to learn the jobs. And is that true? Are you seeing that? Are you seeing more enthusiasm among people saying, Patricia, can you help us get some interns, anything like that? Or is it still like you're asking them?
Well, no, I think employers do have some needs. I mean, the whole ecosystem has changed, right? I think what we see is that there is certainly a shortage. The birth rate is down, and that means that there are just fewer young folks. And then you have the Great Resignation. Those folks are retiring.
I call it the liberation. That you weren't a total serf where you'd have some crummy job where they take advantage of you and you get some choice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think COVID has certainly changed the awareness of workers' rights. And, it's just it's a different ball game right now. And so what I find for our scholars are pretty savvy. They're, come from activist families. They're just not going to go into any job. They're not going to take the jobs that you and I took where we just had to take it. Not to say that the culture of the work world was toxic or any such thing. It's just I do believe that it's an employees market. And our scholars have come up in a time when they are very interested in work-life balance. They're very interested in very positive work culture. They're interested in diversity because Connecticut is no longer, most of the workers who are coming into the workforce now are not white, Caucasian, European. They're really black and brown, mostly Hispanic, but, a very strong black population, immigrant population. And that is just going to change the nature of what employers will have to do to make their places welcoming.
Which makes more than ever the case that New Haven Promise, the scholarship and follow-through program, is that bridge.
Absolutely.
That connects this workforce and the employers who need to find the right people and connect the right people. We're talking about that on Dateline New Haven with Patricia Milton, CEO of New Haven Promise. Patricia, we were talking about this a little before we went on the air. A big part of the job over the years has been follow through, helping students who go to a new environment. They lived in New Haven their whole year. As you said, a majority of them lower income, many of them first time going to college, and helping them succeed and talk to them about what challenges they're facing. What have you noticed since the pandemic? What, all over the country in so many different ways, different sectors, mental health has become just off the charts as a problem, a challenge for people. What are you noticing and how we're now in the third year of the pandemic, as it is easing somewhat, for quite a bit? What are you noticing the students? What kind of advice you have to give them, the kind of challenges they're coming to you with?
Well, I think what we see is that, income, there are huge disparities along the lines of income. Our scholars who many of their parents were on the front line when it came to COVID, they had to go to work. So there were higher infection rates, higher risk factors. Many of them were hit in terms of their income, in terms of, what businesses closed down. And there were a lot here in New Haven that closed down. So as I said before, we don't see that we're back to normal. There is not going to be a back to normal.
Remember you and I ran up on Whitney Avenue pretty early in the pandemic when it was that sort of post-apocalyptic feel, like where'd everyone go?
Everyone,
like the buildings were standing, the humans were killed by the neutron bomb.
There were no cars.
I remember how are we adjusting to this? Yeah.
There were no cars. I kept going to my office, which is very close to Worcester Square, and I'm over in the Arts District, and it was that eerie feeling. There was just no cars, none. But our families, many of them, their families will work in retail. If they worked in restaurants, that was completely closed down. So what we see is we still have very lingering effects. I mean, we see that in New Haven public schools, not to call them out.
But it's like schools elsewhere,
huge,
people bouncing off the walls.
Yeah. There's a huge chronic absenteeism. There are some serious lingering issues. And as I talk to other nonprofit leaders, I'm hearing the same disparity around what's happening, particularly with Black families and Hispanic families, that things are not back to normal.
So where do you step in and where does Promise step into this? Obviously, it's not up to you to solve, but what role do you play?
Well, we did remain open. We remained available, making more calls, continuing our programming, checking in with folks. I think that customer service, being there for folks made a huge difference. And we worked very closely with our higher ed institutions, UConn, Yale, Quinnipiac, UNH, to track those students very closely. And if they were, having difficulty, loosening our guidelines to be responsive to this extraordinary time. So I think that is what has really served us well. I think the challenges going forward will be focused on, because people still are struggling, those populations are struggling, and we have to think of new strategies of how to connect them, that you still need to network, you still need to come to the fair, because the experience you have on your resume during college will make the difference with you getting that plum entry-level job. Connections still matter and networking still matters. And I talk to all my professional friends, and they're extremely busy working It's as if people are trying to make up. These businesses are trying to make up for the revenue that they lost. And our scholars have to be ready. They're not going to get a break. They're just going to be expected to perform. So our programming, like resume writing, interviewing skills, how to self-manage, because if it's a hybrid position, they need to know that you will be able to get that job done and not have to have someone managing you maybe the way it was before pre-pandemic. So there are more responsibilities that our scholars have to live up to, and we have to get them there. It's not just going to happen, like through magical thinking. It's not a spectator sport.
Michelle, CEO of New Haven Promise here on Dateline New Haven, WNHH 103.5 FM, live streamed on newhavenpen.org. Patricia, I ran into you recently at the Yale Club, which I'd never been to. They had a lunch. Someone invited me at the lawn club. It turned out to be very interesting. Josh Jabal, the former governor aide, who has been brought to have Yale ramp up in a big way its investment in cooperation in local tech startups, getting startup companies, and they're doing all this investment already. And he talked about all these jobs they need to get New Haven people into and how we're going to get them. And you stood up, well, I have hundreds of people for you, I think you said. At least hundreds, you said. You might have said
800.
I have 800 people for you. You didn't call me. We have a job. We have an internship fair coming. Come on down. Any follow up on that? Because the guy really liked hearing from you that you spoke up. He said, I really want to connect what we're doing with Yale investing in startups and connecting that to New Haveners.
Right. I mean, I think it was exciting to hear about what he is sort of spearheading here. He talked about Life Sprints, which was a program that was to attract students here for internships in the biosciences. But what I shared is that we had no placements. We certainly sent students to Life Sprints. I think they
never heard of this Life.
It's like the biosciences, companies like Alexion, Pfizer, but many startups as well.
Oh, yeah, we went
that
to the
need help.
chamber.
And as we know, the biosciences
but they're not connected to the actual human beings they think they want to reach. That's where they need you, right?
Right. I think I observed that they did hire students, but many of those students were not local. They were from someplace else. They had to help them with housing. And I'm saying, but I don't understand. We have students who live here. You wouldn't have had to help them with housing. And they're likely to stay. They're going to stay. 86% of our students want to stay right here. And
so what's going to be the follow through?
So we are going to be working more closely. Josh is actually going to work with us and help us to penetrate that market. Help Life Sprints to also, I think, maybe understand what does it take to recruit. You can't recruit. If you do the same thing, you're going to get the same result, right? If you're planning to be in New Haven, which really is a model city in terms of diversity, you cannot have a company that's going to be all white. It's just not going to work. So if you're serious about really serving the citizenry here, then you have to work with community-based organizations like New Haven Promise. We have the entry-level talent that's diverse, and we've been doing this. The internship fair is in its 10th year. So I think my job and, our alumni council, which is where we're developing our young leaders, is to hold these bioscience, startups accountable, because their workforce is actually going to come from mostly us. And they will
Have they been there in the past at your fairs?
Well, last year was the first year of this sort of life sciences collaborative. And I know the chamber has gotten some money from the state to, have these sector partnerships, and we're working with them. But, the way I like to really have some parity is, we need funding to do this work. We've been doing the work, and now we would like to be funded for doing the work of of what folks are saying that they want. They want a diverse workforce. Well, here we are. All these students are going to college, just like students have gone to college for decades. And the only difference here in our organization is they're Black and brown kids. So I don't expect to see any stats any different from the majority. And if it is, it's my job to ask tough questions. And it's also our young activists, scholars and alums are going to ask those tough questions, like Alex Guzne, who's in Alder. He's going to be asking some tough questions.
Who came up through Promise. And in fact, he was at a resume writing workshop. So, I think it's, there's incredible talent here, but there are some challenges. And I think our companies that are saying that they want to work here and live here and be a great citizen needs to understand what those challenges are and to work directly with us. We don't need an intermediary. We know what we're doing. So I expect them to work directly with us and not through intermediaries, because we have a lot of wisdom. As you said, we've been talking to these scholars and their families. We're there every step of the way. Our oldest scholars, alums, are just hitting 30. They're buying homes, they're paying taxes. In fact, we've done that analysis, and by 2024, we'll have, roughly almost about 2,500 scholars who are already graduated, and they will be spending what we call scholar dollars. That means they will be buying homes. They will be getting mortgages. You're good at those phrases.
They will,
scholar dollars.
Scholar dollars. They will be going to graduate school at UNH and whatnot. And over their lifetime, our scholars, will pump in almost $5.5 billion in revenue to this economy. Now, if that's not economic development, I don't want to hear about, obviously the developers, they're getting theirs right now. But what I want to know is, what economic development plan do you have for human capital? Mm-hmm. Because a building without people in it is just a building, right? So I ask those very tough questions. And, and so we're going to be a little bit louder about that. Economic development needs to mean investment in talent, because that is what will drive our economy in perpetuity.
So the way you want them to touch more base directly with the group of 750 a year
Yes.
New Haveners who are succeeding, getting college, coming out, and you're looking for more of a commitment to deal directly with hiring people from New Haven, people of
Absolutely.
color, for these new businesses that are starting up.
Yes.
All right, Patricia Melton. 10 years in, it's interesting when you said that. After a certain point, you built up this organization. You've been so successful. You're associated with it. After a certain time, the time becomes fungible. Sort of like, you might have been here, Patricia, 30 years. Who the heck knows? You're there. It's like you stop thinking about it. You know what I mean? Do you see yourself being here a long time?
Well,
you have been here.
I am going to retire at some point.
You see going here till you retire?
I think the nature of my work will change. We still have many things to achieve with Promise. Mm-hmm. We wanted to diversify our funding. We've had great funding from, obviously, Yale New Haven Health, the Community Foundation. But, and I will say that, we have a nice group of funders. The corporate world is starting to step up, because we're really helping them to see how they can support that. In fact, them supporting these scholars, really is return on investment for them in terms of their bottom line. So we still have a little work to do in that area in terms of really generating activities that will be revenue producing. We're just starting to do that. We have a wonderful new hire, John Miller, who's head of our strategic business partnerships and development. Probably, I don't want to put a time on it, but, maybe 4 or 5 years, it may be time for one of our scholars to take my place.
Oh, okay. And what in that time, what are you going to look at? What do you hope you're going to be able to say? What are you going to see in 4 or 5 years?
We'll have a nice, diverse funding base. We will have some fee for service, businesses will understand, just like they pay for all different types of services, that this is something that needs to be invested in and is a renewable, revenue source. And we're sustainable. We're really not there. I mean, no one's going to let promise fail.
No.
But
That's not on the table.
we need to develop that model a little bit. It needs to be developed a little bit more. We're no longer an infant,
No.
but we're not quite at adulthood.
That's so funny. I think of it as, it's sort of like there was a little controversy at the beginning. Then you came to town. And it was like, it's under control. You know how we kind of think that way? Well, that's under control. We're going to think about something else. We got promise. But you're right. You have to keep doing that hard work to help people succeed, get the money coming in, changing circumstances that you adapt to, what's happened in the economy and the workforce.
Yeah, leadership changes.
Also interesting. Yeah.
Nonprofits, you have to raise that money every
I
year.
know about that, actually.
Yeah.
What do you do for fun? You ride your bike.
Well, yes, I'm a
You
big
were a
biker.
track star in your youth. You still run?
No, not really. I just run from building appointment to appointment.
But you ride that bike a lot. You're pretty serious.
I love to ride my bike, which is great because this is such a wonderful city that's developing out its biking lanes. So I bike the Farmington Canal Trail.
That's a nice trail.
And they're doing a massive project to bring the trail up onto, what is that? It's not Elm Street, it's Grove.
Yeah.
And so that's right behind my
so
office.
weird. They built that on that corner. They built that whole interchange on the sidewalk, and then they kind of stopped. Like, did you notice how all that stuff went in about 3 months ago? Caddy corner
Yes.
to the apartments. I wonder what that was about.
Yeah. Well, the trail is going to come up because they couldn't go through or under the FBI building.
Right. No,
So
that's why they built that above ground.
Yeah,
It's
so
like
they're going
two-thirds
to,
done for
it's
the
going to
last
be
3
above
thirds.
ground down to Long Wharf. And so the trails will be on the street. But, right there behind where the Arts Council is, you will be able to go down onto the Farmington Canal. And then, no vehicles will be down there. And you can ride for miles and miles all the way up to Massachusetts.
Although you did just make a commitment not to be moving on your bicycle, but to sit in a chair for hours at a time as a member of the new Charter Revision Commission. You've been appointed, along with other city leaders, to try to figure us out once every 10 years how we should change what's our constitution, the charter. Should the mayor have 4 terms? Should people have to live in the city for certain jobs? And I know you haven't yet gotten to the nitty-gritty. You don't have a position yourself on anything. How are you feeling about the challenge in general? Why are you doing this? And what are you hoping will happen?
Well, I will say that I was here when the last charter was renewed, and it was a massive overhaul, I guess. I was very interested. I'm interested in learning about the city. I feel as if what we're doing is we're really preparing the sort of the heirs of the city, which are our scholars. They're going to move into positions of leadership, civic engagement, and this is a way that I can educate myself so that I can be better prepared to be a steward of that process. Promise can be better prepared to be a steward of that process.
And you're also showing
Plus, I'm a citizen.
And you're a civic leader.
You
see your role broadly. When I listen to you, that's what I'm hearing.
I do.
I have a specific job to do, and I'm part of a larger community where we're all needing to work together.
Right. I've been here. I've lived in Worcester Square on Olive and Court for 10 years in the same,
What a great
walk
neighborhood.
Up. It is a great neighborhood. You have stayed, and I've watched, it's amazing. Just even in Worcester Square, there's been like 4 or 5 developments, like thousands of people are going to be moving in there.
Game changer.
It really is. I mean, I'm excited because I grew up in a very large city. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and this is much smaller, but it's like any citizen can have their hand and be engaged. And so I love that process.
Well, I'm so glad you're here in New Haven. I'm so glad you came on to Dateline New Haven.
You.
How do people get involved in Promise?
How they can go to our new website landing page and learn about us at newhavenpromise.org. If you just Google it, newhavenpromise.org, it will come up and you can just put your information in there, join our newsletter. We always need volunteers, folks to mentor our scholars, the young people in this city. We work very closely with New Haven Public Schools. So there are enough ways to get involved with New Haven Promise and our partner organizations.
And worth getting involved in.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming in, Jamil. Always so great, inspiring to talk to you.
Thank you. It's
So
always
much good is
wonderful
going
to come
on. You have
here.
a big hand in that. And thank you, Harry Droz, station manager, getting us on more platforms that exist in the multiverse. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing "I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free" from the group CD "A Plea for Peace." This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day, all night, and all weekend long. WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.